Welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be talking all about usability and UX design. Based on what you gave us, this is going to be pretty cool. We've got Steve Krug's Don't Make Me Think and Rocket
Oh,
Surgery Made Easy. Oh, and that YouTube interview with him is really something. I was really struck by how relevant Krug's advice still is. I mean, the web's changed so much since 2000, but his focus on just basic human behavior, it really makes you think. So what really stood out to you from all this?
it's that core message of Krug's that really got me. Don't make me think. It's become like this central idea in web design, and for good reason. Think about it the way our brains work. It hasn't really changed that much. Even though the web has, like you said,
Yeah.
we still get distracted easily. We still skim more than we read.
Yeah.
We all just want things to be simple, right? It's like Krug just understood something really basic about how we use the web.
Yeah, that don't make me think thing, it really sticks with you. It reminds me of this time I was trying to book a doctor's appointment online, and the website was just awful. So many drop-down menus and confusing labels. It took me forever just to figure out where to even start. Forget about actually booking the appointment.
Sounds like they totally missed the point about designing for scanning,
Yeah.
not reading. You know.
Yeah.
Krug's really big on how we tend to scan pages. Our eyes just dart around, picking out keywords and visuals, the things that jump out at us. And if those cues are missing, or if they're badly designed, well, people get frustrated and they leave.
It's crazy how often we just stumble through things online. We don't really get how they work. We just kind of figure it out as we go. In his book, Krug talks about people typing URLs into search engines instead of the address bar. It's funny, but it also makes you think.
Oh, totally. It just shows how important conventions are in web design. When sites use familiar patterns, like visual hierarchies and clear page titles, and things we're all used to, like breadcrumbs and tabs for navigation, it reduces the mental effort it takes to use them. It's like everyone's speaking the same language.
And speaking of navigation, Krug's trunk test is such a great way to think about it. Imagine being blindfolded and dropped onto a random web page. You have to figure out where you are and what the site's about. Have you ever felt totally lost on a website? What do you think makes that happen?
Oh, absolutely. We've all been there. I think one of the biggest culprits is inconsistent navigation. When menus change all the time or labels aren't clear, the whole structure of the site just doesn't make sense. It's like trying to use a map with missing streets and landmarks. The trunk test forces you to think like a user who just landed on your page. Can they figure out where they are and what to do?
And the home page.
Hmm.
That's where things can get really messy. There's always this pressure to cram everything onto it. Mission statements, promotions, the whole site hierarchy.
Yeah, it's a tough one. You want to promote everything, but you also want to keep things clean and easy to use. Krug compares it to the tragedy of the commons, where individual interests can end up hurting everyone. In this case, it's the user's attention and goodwill that get depleted.
In that YouTube interview, Krug talks about the dark side of usability too. It's that pressure to optimize for clicks and conversions, even if it's not good for the user.
That's such an important point. As UX professionals, we have to balance business goals with user needs. The ideal is that designs should never be manipulative. They shouldn't trick people into doing things they wouldn't otherwise do. Krug really stresses putting the user first, even when it comes to seemingly small things like button placement.
One of the things I really liked was his advice on usability testing. He makes it sound so simple, even for teams without a lot of resources.
That's the brilliance of his approach. He takes all the mystery out of it. And he stresses that it's not about being perfect, it's about making progress. The main thing is to start testing early and keep testing often. Even if you just have a few users and a very basic prototype, the insights you gain can be incredibly valuable.
I really like his philosophy of recruiting loosely and grading on a curve. It takes the pressure off finding the absolute perfect test subjects.
I totally agree, especially for sites that don't require specialized knowledge. The core principles of usability are pretty universal. You can learn a lot from observing how people use the site. Even if they're not your ideal target demographic, it's about finding those points of friction, the places where people get stuck.
Krug tells this story about a team that saved $100,000 just by making one change based on feedback from a usability test.
It just shows how much impact even small usability issues can have, both in terms of user satisfaction and business results. Investing in testing can really pay off.
Now, you can't talk about web design without talking about smartphones. They've completely changed the game. And Krug really gets into the unique challenges of mobile usability.
Oh, absolutely. Mobile brought about a huge shift. Smaller screens, different ways of interacting, and often slower connections. All these limitations force us to really rethink our approach to design. What's truly essential for the mobile user? What trade-offs do we need to make?
Krug was really frustrated with the CBS News mobile site. He talks about how they chopped up the content into tiny pieces. Users had to scroll past the same image over and over.
That's a classic example of how important affordances are in mobile design. Without a cursor, we lose those hover states that signal interactivity. We have to be much more explicit about what's clickable. Clear visuals and intuitive layout become even more crucial.
It's almost like we have to relearn how to interact with websites on mobile. We can't just rely on those desktop habits anymore.
You got it. And this is where usability testing on mobile devices is so important. You can see where people struggle, where they need more guidance.
But it's not all bad news on mobile. Krug also talks about these amazing, delightful apps, like SoundHound, which identifies songs and even displays the lyrics in sync.
Those are the apps that really shine. They find that balance between being innovative and being easy to use. They can have all the bells and whistles you want, but if it's confusing to use, the delight wears off pretty quickly.
You're so right. It's about that sweet spot, where an app is both innovative and intuitive.
Exactly. And that leads us to one of Krug's most powerful ideas, usability as common courtesy.
I really love that concept.
It's about designing things that treat users with respect, that are considerate of their time and effort. Krug says that a good website or app should make people feel valued, like they're appreciated. It should anticipate their needs, provide clear info, and avoid unnecessary frustration, like you're treating them as a welcomed guest.
He has this great example of a really unhelpful airline website. During a potential strike, when people were already stressed out,
It's the perfect illustration of how not to do it. Instead of being helpful and informative, the website just made things worse. It was the opposite of considerate.
so how do we create those good experiences? How do we refill that reservoir of goodwill that Krug talks about?
There are so many things we can do. Offer clear FAQs, provide helpful error messages, anticipate user needs and save them steps. It's all about going the extra mile, showing respect.
It's amazing how such small things can make a big difference.
It all goes back to don't make me think. By designing with clarity, intuition, and consideration, we create online experiences that are easy to use and genuinely enjoyable.
And Krug also talks about accessibility being a crucial part of usability. It's not just about making things work for people with disabilities, it's about making things better for everyone.
Absolutely. When we make things accessible, we often end up solving usability problems that benefit everyone, like providing text alternatives for images. It helps people who use screen readers, but it also helps people who are just skimming the page or who have a slow connection. It's a win-win.
So accessibility is really just good design, period.
That's a great way to put it. It's about making the web more inclusive and user-friendly for everyone.
This has been such a fascinating look at Steve Krug's work. It's amazing how relevant his ideas still are, even today.
You know, his ideas really make you think about the future, too.
What do you mean?
Well, technology is always changing, right? So I wonder, what will be the biggest challenges for usability in the next few years?
That's a good question. What do you think?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is AI. It's changing how we interact with tech. You know, we're moving away from typing and clicking, more towards, like, talking and gesturing.
Yeah, like voice assistants and stuff.
Exactly. But designing for those kinds of interactions, it's a whole new challenge. We have to make sure those systems are really intuitive. They have to understand context, intent.
So AI needs to learn its manners, basically.
That's one way to put it.
It can't just be efficient. It has to understand us.
Right. And on top of that, we have this increasingly fragmented digital ecosystem. We're using so many different devices, platforms, channels.
Yeah, it's like the digital world is this giant maze now.
Exactly. And we, as UX designers, have to help people navigate it.
So it's not just about designing one website or app anymore. It's about designing the whole experience.
That's a great way to put it. And then there's personalization. As tech gets smarter, people expect more tailored experiences.
Which is cool, but it can also feel a bit creepy if it goes too far.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's a delicate balance between personalization and privacy. Users should always feel in control of their data.
So it's not just about the technology itself, it's about trust.
Exactly. And that leads to what I think might be the biggest challenge of all, keeping that human-centered focus as technology advances.
You mean not getting so caught up in the latest gadgets that we forget about the people using them?
Exactly. Technology should empower us, not overwhelm us. And it's up to UX designers to make sure that happens.
Speaking of which, let's talk more about usability testing.
Great idea. It's one of the best ways to see how people actually use our designs.
I used to think usability testing was this really formal, expensive thing, like something only big companies could afford.
A lot of people think that. But Krug shows how it can be simple and accessible.
Yeah, he makes it sound like something any team can do.
Exactly. The key is to start testing early and often, even if you just have a few users and a basic prototype.
He also has that idea about recruiting loosely and grading on a curve.
Yeah, it's a really useful approach. It means you don't have to stress about finding the absolute perfect test participants.
So it's more about getting a diverse range of perspectives.
Precisely. The more diverse your participants, the better. You're more likely to uncover usability issues that you might otherwise miss.
So how do you actually go about doing a usability test?
Well, first you have to define your goals. What are you hoping to learn? What specific tasks do you want users to try?
And then you recruit your participants.
Right. And when you design the test itself, try to make it as realistic as possible. Give them tasks that they would actually do in real life.
And I remember Krug talks about thinking aloud during testing.
Oh, that's so important. Encourage people to verbalize their thoughts as they're going through the tasks. It helps you understand their mental models, why they do what they do.
It's like you get to see the website through their eyes.
Exactly. And then, after the tests, you analyze the results. Look for patterns, identify any recurring issues.
And then the real work begins, right?
You got it. Finding solutions is where it gets really interesting. And it's important to involve everyone: designers, developers, researchers.
Krug also stresses that testing shouldn't be a one-time thing. It should be an ongoing process.
Absolutely. Testing should inform the design as it evolves.
So we've talked about general usability, but what about mobile specifically? It's such a huge part of the web now.
It's changed everything.
I was really struck by Krug's story about the CBS News mobile site. Even big companies can get mobile usability wrong.
That's right. It can happen to anyone.
So what makes mobile design so challenging?
It's all the constraints, smaller screens, different ways of interacting, often slower connections. It forces us to be really strategic with our design choices.
Like you were saying earlier, it's all about trade-offs.
Exactly. What's absolutely essential? What can we leave out?
And Krug also talks about how affordances have to be more explicit on mobile. Because we don't have a cursor, we can't just hover over things to see if they're clickable.
That's a huge difference from desktop design.
Yeah.
We have to be much clearer about what's interactive.
So we have to kind of retrain our brains a bit when we're using our phones.
That's a good way to put it. And again, this is where usability testing is so valuable. You can observe how people actually use their phones and see if your design is intuitive.
But it's not all doom and gloom with mobile, right? Krug also talks about these really delightful apps like SoundHound, which does so much more than just identify songs.
Those are the apps that get it right. They manage to be both innovative and easy to use.
It's that sweet spot again.
Exactly. And it all ties into Krug's idea of usability as common courtesy.
The more we talk about it, the more I like that concept.
It's all about designing with empathy and respect for the user.
Like you said earlier, treating them like a welcomed guest.
That's it.
Krug's example of the bad airline website really shows what not to do.
Oh, yeah, that was a classic case of how a lack of consideration can backfire.
So how do we create those good experiences? How do we build that reservoir of goodwill?
By being mindful of the user at every step, providing clear information, helpful error messages, anticipating their needs.
It's about going the extra mile to make things easier.
Exactly. And it all comes back to don't make me think. That's really the foundation of good UX design.
And Krug also talks about accessibility being a crucial part of usability.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not just about making things work for people with disabilities. It's about making things better for everyone.
Exactly. When we prioritize accessibility, we often end up solving usability problems that everyone benefits from.
So good design is inclusive design.
I couldn't agree more. It's about making the web a better place for everyone.
This has been such a great discussion. It's clear that Steve Krug's ideas are still so relevant, even in today's world.
And they'll be even more relevant in the future, I think.
Oh, how so?
Well, think about how we interact with tech now. It's not just screens and keyboards anymore. We have voice interfaces, gesture control, even AR and VR are becoming more common.
Yeah, it seems like there's a new gadget every day.
And designing for those things, it's a whole different ballgame. We have to think about how people use their voices, their bodies, their whole sensory experience.
So it's not just about clicking buttons anymore.
Nope. It's much more immersive.
It's like that "don't make me think" idea has to evolve too.
Exactly. We need to make sure these new interactions feel natural.
No matter what the technology is.
Right. And then you have all these connected devices, smartwatches, smart speakers, smart appliances.
It's like everything's getting connected to the internet.
It's a whole new world to design for.
It's going to be a challenge to make all those things work together seamlessly.
Oh, for sure. And then there's the ethical side of things. As technology becomes more powerful, we have to be even more careful about how we design it.
We don't want to create things that have unintended consequences.
Exactly. We have to design with empathy. We have to understand human needs and values.
It's about using technology for good.
And that brings me to what I think is the most important thing, keeping that human-centered approach, even if technology gets more and more complex.
So we don't get so caught up in the technology itself that we forget about the people using it.
Exactly. We have to keep reminding ourselves that usability is all about people.
This has been a really eye-opening deep dive. It's clear that good design is about so much more than just making things look pretty.
I couldn't agree more.
It's about understanding people and creating experiences that are truly enjoyable and meaningful.
And those principles will always be important, no matter how much technology changes.
Well said. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. This has been a fantastic conversation. And for our listener, if you want to learn more, we highly recommend checking out Steve Krug's work. His books are full of practical advice that you can use to create better, more human-centered designs. Until next time, keep those designs coming.